Welcome, everybody, to From the Chamber, the church studio. I'm Lisa.
I'm Cade.
Yeah, and we have a fabulous guest a really fun guest with us today.
Follow me to the church.
Danny O'Connor, Danny Boy. Is that which one?
The fabulous Danny Boy.
Are you a little fab?
You pause on the fabulous. I'm like, I'm fabulous. You know, I'll take it.
We're so glad you're here
Danny's
today.
fine. Yeah, listen, it's a treat. I've always wanted to come and see this. I remember seeing it on Facebook and what Teresa was doing, and I was like, I want to go see. I didn't know where it was for the longest, and then finally, I was coming down on my motorcycle, and I took a left or a right coming up from the park. I was like, there it is. I only knew recently where it was, which is good because I was running a little late today. So I got here right on time.
You're fine. You're
fine.
You have evolved in your career. I'll tell you that. You started out, let's remind people who Danny O'Connor is. House of Pain.
Yeah, House of Pain.
Which was kind of a hip hop group that you were like the main MC.
No, so
co-MC,
something like that. That evolved as well. I started out hip hop. We were talking earlier about different forms of music. I was born in New York and then raised in Los Angeles, and then my mother, because I was a handful, used to send me back to the East Coast every summer. And this is
to Brooklyn. Yeah.
Well, no, actually, everybody left Brooklyn to Staten Island, and everybody left Staten Island to New Jersey, and now. Would you believe everybody ended up in Florida? That is the migration pattern for any East Coaster.
Oh, wow.
But I ended up going back to Staten Island and then New Jersey. So pre-internet, this is prehistoric, before there was any internet or cell phones, there was a very big divide between West and East Coast, especially music and influence-wise. So I was like a cultural exchange as a young kid because I would bring surfing and skateboard and California rock type stuff and to New York. And then I would come home after summer with a lot of disco, R&B, and early hip hop stuff, which was weird because people weren't they didn't embrace it in the way we do now where everything kind of goes. And so you were kind of judged by that. And never in a million years did I think I would be doing music. I always loved music. My mother was also very influential as far as her record collection was fantastic. It was a very heavily R&B and some disco, but it was mostly Motown stuff. So growing up, I constantly listened to Marvin Gaye and Nancy Wells and Al Green and all the classics. So, but like I said earlier, off camera, when I got to LA, that was a problem because everybody was into like the status quo rock band stuff. So they were calling me Disco Dan, which would get you punched in the face just because it was a bad, it wasn't the stigma and now I like it. Now you can call it to me. But back in the day, it was an insult. It was like, it was hurtful because you felt like you get ostracized for liking anything that wasn't in that box. And in that box, I liked everything. I liked Ozzy and Led Zeppelin and Van Halen as much, but you could not break rank with that. Otherwise you would be ostracized. So I soon broke rank with that. And then going back and forth. So what ends up happening, I end up having no life plan. I end up getting a job at a record store. My record IQ goes through the roof because we were helping ourselves to a lot of their music, if you know what I mean. So we were promoting things for ourselves. And so things that I wouldn't have probably bought, I was able to open them because I was the product manager and I could play it in store. And I was like, oh, this is what Bad Brains sound like, or this is what so-and-so sound. And so I was able to sample everything. And
you really got quite an education between that and the migration.
I'm telling you, and the closest thing to it, if you're at home Googling, or if you know, obviously you know, but there's a guy, Glenn E. Friedman, who's a photographer and tremendous photographer. And he grew up, he's an LA guy. And at 14, he started shooting all the Dogtown skateboard stuff in Venice and Santa Monica. Mm-hmm. They fly him around the world. He has literally like a Cameron Crowe experience where he's doing all kinds of stuff at 14 that grown men can't do. He ends up going to New York and DC covering all the punk rock stuff. So like Minor Threat and stuff like that. All the album covers for Def Jam and all the punk rock and all the suicidal. It's all one guy's stuff. And his name is Glenn Friedman. Well, I had that kind of experience at a way smaller level. Yeah. But it was, again, it was a very eclectic way to grow up. And then we were talking roller skating and roller rinks. And so I'm just getting hit with all the stuff that the average kid is not leaving the block, is not getting hit with listening to power radio stations. Sure. And so as I got older, I was like, I have no life plan. I started working at the record store, and then we made a band after that. And so I started House of Pain. By no means was I the main member, nor I'm a hype
Any
man.
significance behind House of Pain?
Yes, it came from an Oingo Boingo song, which is a really long story, which is another like weird, like you'd be in LA and Oingo Boingo was everything. You'd go to New York and everybody was like, who? Fishbone in New York was like, they weren't as hip to it as they were so they were regional acts, but it's an Oingo Boingo song, and that song was written about the island of Dr. Monroe, which I didn't know at the time. But I just like the sound of it, and there's a long backstory. You guys it'll take hours for me to unpack all this stuff. I assure
Let everybody
you.
Google it.
So, but I started the group Everlast. We went to high school together. He had already had a record deal with Ice-T, put a solo record out, and it was just an interesting time where we didn't see us on the landscape, which were tough Irish white boys. And so there was the Beastie Boys and there was Third Base, but they were very different than we were. And so us and Cypress Hill were friends at that time. Everlast was friends with Muggs from Cypress Hill, who's the producer of Jump Around and our first record, and was also the DJ and producer of Cypress Hill. And so we had something different in 90, 91, and then we all came out in 92 and changed the face for a while there. West Coast got the ball back, but we had influence because a lot of those dudes also were East Coasters who grew up in LA.
Yeah.
So I'm a hype man. At the end of the day, for years I considered myself a rapper, but I was never great at it. I was great at a time where very few white dudes were, but then the bar kept getting. My skill is packaging, marketing. It's my name, my logo, my branding. Because I was a product manager at a record store, I was very keen on seeing what belonged on the end cap, how they paid extra to do that, how we skinned the store. And I'm a marketing guy is what I'm getting at.
We know you are.
Yeah.
But it's an important skill to have. And back then you depended on the record label to do that for you. I would never trust them. Even when you had a great record label, we were at a great record label, Tommy Boy, which was, if you're in hip hop and you're on Def Jam or Tommy Boy in that era, it's everything. It's the sign of like approval. People buy blind just because it's on those labels. So to be on that label was an honor, and they were genius and put stickers in records and did a lot of like street marketing. But I would never let them control how they, So I had a big hand in that, and that was everything. And now, if you're an artist, you have to be 360 that way. There's nobody coming to help you. There's nobody who can help you.
You're really kind of early to the game in that regard, because that's
Nobody
just the way it is now. It's just the rule.
And I know Chuck D. He said he was drawing and did his logo and gave it to Hayes, which is another friend. And there was a small contingent of like creative in many ways type of stuff. But I can assure you that most people I know that rhyme, they do that great, and that's all they do great. And so you need dudes like me. You need a symbiotic relationship between two people who can, do what you can. Give me the ball at the 50-yard line, and then I'll score. Or vice versa. I got it. I'm stuck. Take it. Score. So, and unfortunately, that's my undoing as well. And I could give college lectures on it's the worst seat in the house long term. Yeah. Because you said something about could we play music in between. I don't own the rights to that because I didn't write that. That's one. Publishing is everything. And
Jump
I
around,
made,
you're talking about.
and I made more on accident in the 90s than I've ever made on purpose 2020 till
That's a
now.
great quote.
So I assure you that merchandising back then made me a millionaire. I was driving Ferraris when other dudes were driving BMWs. And so, but that's only when you got a hit and when you're touring a lot.
Right.
That money dries up, and the publishing caught up soon, and that guy is driving whatever he wants.
Yeah,
now.
that
And I do have a
publisher
cop
sure
car.
is.
Have you ever thought of?
Everlast.
Did you know anything about publishing?
No,
how you could keep the
I
rights?
barely knew how to do laundry. Like I still can barely, No.
Did you ever
And if you
consider
write
taking,
and you're
like-
an artist, you Google publishing, please. You know what's funny? You said that. I used to be friends with a girl named Amanda Anka, and her dad is Paul Anka. And I got a call from Paul Anka when we signed our record deal, and he said, "This is Paul Anka," and I said, "I didn't do it. It was not me." He said, "Calm down." He said, "I have one piece of advice for you. I heard you just signed a record deal." I said, "This is true." He said, "Keep your publishing."
Yes.
And then he hung up. And Paul Anka wrote for Elvis. He wrote for everybody.
If you're a songwriter or you own publishing rights,
yeah, it's everything.
You're golden.
It's your mailbox money.
Exactly.
It's literally
You go to the post
if you get
office.
a few, they come to you. So yes, but to be 100% honest, what I did again, it's a great skill and a needed thing, and it's a big reason of why we were so successful. But long term, it only pays when it pays, and I still get twos and fews and little seeds and stems, but it's not gonna. you know, and I used to curse that.
Yeah.
You know, it was terrible because it's no fun watching everybody else slowly keep growing financially. And you're like, what? You know, and I was a fool with my money. People are like, how, you know, like I never lost any of it. I spent it all. So let's start there.
Well,
it's
you
my
were driving those
responsibility.
Ferraris.
I know. That was just like, I had a fleet. Okay. I assure you, you know, you got a lot of, the bar is high in hip hop to show all your outside stuff. And I did it.
Were you part of that whole
could.
East Coast, West Coast thing?
No, that was after.
That was after.
Yeah. It was like the mid 90s Biggie and Tupac and all that stuff.
Yeah.
No, I'll always have an East Coast heart, even though I grew up in Los Angeles, and now I'm comfortably in the middle, so I don't have to play, you know.
I think they worked it out, didn't they?
They're both dead, so yeah.
Yeah, well, not even like Snoop Dogg.
Kind of like, well.
Yeah.
But so as far as, is keep your publishing.
Yeah.
You get paid once with the merch. Although if you do it well, you get handsomely paid. I'm not complaining. And then I'll just tell you this. Had I been able to, let's just say I wrote a hit song and I always got mailbox money, I don't know that I would have much motivation to do anything. So it's forced me to keep reinventing, and looking back at 51, I go, wow, like, because I know myself. I'm like the hardest working lazy guy you ever met. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so
that's a good way to put
that. No, because I'm always working, but what I can get accomplished, and I struggle just like everybody else, or some people. But I know my motivation would, if I just constantly get a free check, mailbox money, I'm like,
yeah.
So it forces me to go outside of my comfort zone. And that's where I find the victories that, that I didn't even know I wanted. And it's usually in the self-esteem area where you're doing esteemable stuff. Shocker, you get esteemable, self-esteem. And I go, doing what I do brings me that self-esteem, and it gives me a purpose. Yeah. I sat for 20 years in Hollywood, just treading water. I get a little bit of mailbox money, but it ain't enough to sit idly back and do nothing. I'm not in that situation, but you can only do that so long without, I can only do that so long without having a purpose. And the purpose is what I found here in Tulsa, which we'll get to, but that changed everything for me. And so for the last, let's even call it, 15, 20 years, I was sitting in Beverly Hills just going, what do I do now? And having no idea what to do next.
And that's not good. Yeah. That idle time's not good.
No.
Can't be.
Open this, gonna make a sound.
So House of Pain, we had that. What happened after that?
You've had all good groups, we broke up. Right. We started fighting a lot. It wasn't even, it just, everybody had different, you get to that thing is annoying. Who's doing that? I thought it sounded like a BB's going on. Like that's my ADD, or that's my obsessive compulsive. I'm like, who's doing that? Where's that coming from? What was I going to say?
House of Pain broke up.
Yes, House of Pain broke up, and our DJ went to Limp Bizkit and made Oodles and Oodles and had a really good run. And Everlast went and got a Grammy and sold millions of records too. And so
sure did.
I'm like, I felt like a victim, and I felt, and none of it was true, but I threw about a decade-long pity party, and that's when I discovered drugs. And prior to that, I'd been, I may have dabbled once or twice, but it wasn't my thing. Mm-hmm. But the pain and that feeling of being left behind, being thrown away,
that happens to so many artists of all sorts, every genre.
So I started medicating with methamphetamines. Shocker. And I spent, a good, close to, the first run was 5-year downward spiral. Then I got sober and got a little bit of time together. And then I thought I only had a drinking problem, and that drugs clearly was my problem. But drinking, I'm Irish, it's my birthright. What's a little Corona going to do to a big guy like me? And it was 3.5 years of sobriety. I flushed down the toilet for a Corona. And it was 3 days after I was back at the drug dealer's house doing methamphetamines for another almost 3.5 year downward spiral. And by the time I came to, I was toothless, living in an old warehouse, and warrant for my arrest, and suspended driver's license, and car that had gone impounded, and most of the stuff that I owned was in a box, sitting next to the couch that I was sleeping on. I got bad. Mm-hmm. And that's what I needed to happen for me to, have that spiritual awakening, and that changed my life as well. And so a series of things, and this is the story I'm telling is I'm sure you've done a million interviews with people where you're like, this is almost the carbon copy story. The older I get, I hear the story a lot, but in the same way, you'll see that a lot. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are famous from other bands that the common, besides, there's other common threads, but a lot of them is like the front man. They can't stand, and I'm not saying I can't stand Everlast. It's just we just outgrew each other in different ways. But I'm just saying, like, where there's two, there is the potential for a dispute. And every dude that I'm like good friends with, they're in bands that they don't talk to the other members, or they don't. Not every band, not all of the bands, but
I've heard it,
a lot of my heroes are like they don't. I'm like, you don't talk to them? I'm like, no. Like, say no more. I get it, because and it just happens, and then it's sad because it there's got to be a way to work all of that stuff out. But we're in a vanity business, and everybody is vain, and everybody is selfish and self-centered and self-seeking, and it's part of the competitive nature that we have as artists and creators and creatives. And there's got to be a balance, and that's where I find myself now, and I work on it. And again, I didn't come to this on a winning streak. None of this happens because if I get mailbox money and I would be like, too busy to do anything. I can't be bothered. Fuck yourself. Like, I just, it didn't make me a humble guy. I had to get humiliated by myself to feel, some type of a way.
Ask, what happened? You said it was your spiritual awakening. What happened?
Either jails, institution, or death is what's promised to an alcoholic and an addict. And then I was homicidal and suicidal within the same breath. And I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I knew there was a better way. I had been sober before, and I thought if I ever got to the point where I felt this way again, which I had always felt this way through my using, it was always like not good. But I thought, well, I can always go back to a 12-step program, but it didn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. I don't know anybody you just can't go back and it just all of a sudden takes. It was a gift the first time, and I really had to like hit rock bottom for it to take. And I don't know why it took, but it's taken, and it's 15 and a half years ago I got sober, and I've been, sober ever since. And if you're sober and then you're in the 12-step program and you work the 12 steps, then those steps is what the whole purpose of the steps is, to connect you to a power greater than yourself, which I call God. And so this was not what I was after. I just wanted my life to stop sucking out loud because I couldn't do it anymore. So, and forgive me, but there's a saint, and I should know his name because I quote him all the time. And someone had brought it up in a meeting, but they're like, he was the closest to God. And the way he got that way, he was like, it wasn't my intention. I just kept backing away from the devil as a metaphor. And he ended up closest to God that way. And that's really what I did. It was just too hot for me anymore. I just kept backing up. And one day I realized I'm like completely on the other side of, this. And so I do my best to maintain it, and it's everything. And I realized that the outside stuff never fixed me. I like shiny shit. I'm not going to tell you I don't. I'm still constantly like, like I'll be doing good. And when the car goes by, and I need that car, and I start to obsess, or I need that thing, I need that watch, I need that thing. Yeah. That's how you catch what is it? I think a raccoon. You can drill a hole. They drill holes in logs and put nails, so there's just a small opening, and they put a little piece of tinfoil. And the raccoon will see it down there and grab it and make a fist, and then the nails got him. And all he has to do is let go of the tinfoil to get his hand out, but he refuses to let go. Wow. And he's stuck.
I know that.
I'm that. Like, I see it, I'm like, I got to have it. And they're like, dude, let go. You're trapped. I'm like, nah, I'm not letting go.
Man, that's some self-awareness.
I will trade half of it for some mailbox money and keep half of the other. There's got to be a fine balance of, spirituality and commerce. I'm still trying to find that balance, but I will settle. Not even settle. I will take for sure. I'm being cheeky, but.
Well, once you got sober, you seem to have taken control of your life.
No. It took a long time. I just kept backing away and staying on the right side of the thing and keep making right choices. And within reason, I could tell you, I've been married, divorced, arrested in sobriety, shit that you're like, you're sober. This should not be, and it just life on life's terms. It is just that. And, but I do the work. And if you're sober and you're listening, or you're in the 12 steps, you understand what that means. There's being dry and just not using and drinking. And then there's not using and drinking and then working a program. And the program is, again, 12 steps that get you right, Do an inventory, you see your part. I'm no longer a victim. I can see what I've done. I make my amends. And then the last 3 are trust God, clean house, and help others, work with others. And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah.
But didn't know it I was just a
seems
fan
like
of a movie, and
a
then
lot of people's
you know,
stories involve that kind of rock bottom moment because it takes that rock bottom to make you want.
you wouldn't
sobriety,
accept it.
you
You
know?
would not accept. Listen, until I was out of good ideas, I had to be even out of bad ideas. Where I'm like, that's a terrible idea, but I'm gonna try it just to see before I accept that seat in AA. I'm just not gonna.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you have to be that, and that's as willing as the dying can be, and that's what you know. So, but yeah, so that's just that's where everything for me stays as far as like my base is that I don't go to church because I found my God where I need to. I'm not a religious guy. I'm a spiritual guy. I've often heard it said, religion is for people who fear going to hell, and spirituality is for people who've already been there, and I've already been there in that sense. So I'm just here doing what I do. I hope
What
that
works
this
for
doesn't
you.
come off as like holier than thou or pious, because I am.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm just trying to again just stay right sized. You know what I
I
mean?
get it, yeah.
And just easier, softer way is just to do the work, give of myself. Every time I'm asked to do something, my immediate is like no, and then I go sure, okay, with this that it doesn't. People can do good things. I'm like let me think about it. Here's an opportunity for you to do something, or you can sit home on the computer. Can I get back to you on that? Like I really have to. And when I say yes and I go out of my comfort zone, it always works.
Isn't that weird?
It always
Sometimes
works.
you just show up.
The more I give, the more I get back. It's just showing up, literally showing up. The potential is infinite for things to go right. Just imagine if it goes right. I always imagine what if it goes wrong? What if I don't like it? What if I
Yeah, a lot of people do.
I know. So it's just a shift in perception, and that is the whole thing. And so I feel like I just led an AA meeting right now.
It's like, well, I think
So,
two people just gave their heart to
There you
Jesus.
go. Right? The lighter just went up. Yeah, right. Like Johnny.
The Harwelden Mansion, located in Tulsa, Oklahoma, is your choice for a luxury destination bed and breakfast. Stunning and unique, beautifully decorated suites await you for your business or leisure. Constructed in the 1920s, the historic Harwelden Mansion boasts elegant and comfortable accommodations, Egyptian cotton towels, Peacock Alley linens, and Hermes bath products. All rooms stocked with complimentary beer, wine, tea, coffee, and soda. And you'll appreciate the welcome snack and turn-down service, minutes from the world-renowned gathering place. Book your overnight stay at harweldenmansion.com. That's HARWELDEN mansion.com. Let's go back to the music.
Okay.
You came up with another group.
I did La Coka Nostra. And so La Coka Nostra started off as the old DJ in House of Pain, DJ Lethal, who was a dear friend. After Limp Bizkit, he got a deal at Geffen. He got a label deal because he's a producer.
Geffen Records. Yeah.
And so he was looking for groups to sign. And I found a dude in Boston that wanted me to rhyme on his record. And when I got to Boston, I was like, this guy is so good. I don't even, how can I help him? He was like, and so I was like, I need to bring him back to LA and get him a deal with Lethal, and let's see if we can do that. And so I brought him, and I had another guy, and then Lethal had a guy, and we're like, why make 3 records when we could make 1 record? These guys would make a great group. And then they were like, why don't you get in the group? I'm like, I don't get in the group, because my mind mentally had been like, I'm done with the group thing. I'm too old for hip hop. This is when I was in my 30s, like 33, 34, and I'm 51
What
now.
you'd give now.
Yeah, no, of course. And so, long story longer, we ended up making a group, and more people started to join and became a super group. And in the 11th hour, Everlast reached out through MySpace and was like, hey, I like what you're doing with this La Coka Nostra. I want to get down with it. I'm like, oh, what? I hadn't talked to this guy in 10 years. It's like, oh, he wants to do a song with us. He's like, no, I want to join the group. And I was like, what? And so it was it was either going to be the greatest thing ever or not so good. And it turned out to be not so good in the long run. But
Did you have
at
fun?
the time, you know what? Everything happens for a reason. It brought me to Tulsa for the first time, and that's when I found the Outsiders house. And so,
Were you playing at Cane's? Yeah.
we were playing Cane's Bar
What
in
happened?
2009. So La Coka Nostra, we take a tour with a group called Cottonmouth Kings, who were on the label that we were on. We were the supporting act, and we had never played Tulsa before with House of Pain for whatever reason. I don't know that there was, but we never come through here before, and so I got to Tulsa, and we had a 3-day layover because you always stay in a city that's more economically feasible than you would to take the next stop and go to Dallas and incur those charges. And so I was like, fantastic. Here I am, sober as a judge, highly caffeinated, in a city that looked to be shuttered. There was nothing, I mean, you know, like I know, like in 2009, the only thing downtown Tulsa was Cain's Barroom and Spaghetti Warehouse.
Yeah.
And I'm from New York. I didn't need any spaghetti. Sorry, I didn't need any spaghetti from a warehouse. And it wasn't even open, so it didn't matter. But I just was like, this town is in. I immediately felt something special here. The train was going through. I'd hear the train whistle. I hadn't heard that in forever. The train horn and the way the sun was setting, and I was like, I felt so familiar. And that's when I had like an epiphany. I was like, oh my God, Tulsa. Was The Outsiders filmed here? Son of a, I think The Outsiders.
You were an S.E. Hinton fan.
Yeah, I was a huge fan. I mean, I went into the movie theater at 13. Let me just back up. At 2 months old, my father went to prison, and I met him twice after he come out. He was murdered when I was 17, and a diehard alcoholic, and grew up in a very, it just in an environment that seemed normal growing up in it, but it wasn't. And just you know, it's the 70s. There was a lot of alcoholism and abuse going on. And so by the time I got to California, I was like, what is going on? Like it was culture shock, you know, and everybody seemed to have their shit together. It had even money to get whatever they wanted. And we just didn't have it like that. I'm trying to tell you, we were dirt poor because we were not. My mother did good for a female in that era where women were vastly underpaid in her profession. And she was a senior systems something. She was a computer programmer.
Yeah.
And this is why we came to LA, because of the whole computers. If she worked at the Chase Manhattan Bank as a key punch operator at night, and if you wanted to get into computers and programming, you had to come to LA. And my uncle and her both came to LA for those jobs, and they did okay. But my point is, I just never fit in. I just couldn't figure it out. So when I go into the theater at 13 to see The Outsiders, I didn't even know what I was going to see, but I came out a completely changed person. And I was like, if all I had in this world was guys like that looking out for my best interest, that would be enough. And I carried that with me for the rest of my life, as far as like, you know, and I know, I used to say I think, but when you don't have a family structure at home, you go replicate that in the real world, whether it's a gang or a crew or a whatever, you're a team, of course, a group of, and throughout my life. And that's what really that was another appeal to hip hop to me, was like, you know, there were dudes that I knew that played guitar for hours and alone in their room. That was not appealing to me, even if, you know, everybody wants to play guitar, but not everybody wants to spend 8 hours a day doing what it takes to be good at it, proficient and great at it. Hip hop was like a crew. It was like we could all be a crew right now. And I write graffiti, I break dance a little, I do a little, you know, and so that was the appeal. So when I saw The Outsiders, again, my mind was changed about everything. And I didn't need, again, it was the shiny things were all around me, and I was like, I just prefer just a group of dudes that have my back. So when I got here, that clicked with me, and I went looking for locations. We had a driver, and the driver said he knew where the drive-in was. We went out to see the drive-in, and my mind was like, because the Admiral Twin Drive-In looks exactly like it did in the movie. It's like nothing, and that you don't find in LA or New York. You just not. We just constantly. And then we found the Crutchfield Park by looking on the website. There was a website called Tulsa TV Memories. It's still on there. It's still old, antiquated ass website, but it's brilliant, you know. And then by finding the park, I found the house. And again, I could not believe it. I had just got a new BlackBerry, so it had like a 1.0 megapixel camera, which was like, if I look at the photos now, you're like, they're not even
grainy.
Yeah, like, I don't know how they. But I took a photo of that house, and I took a photo of the Cain's Barroom. That night we had a sound check, and the guy said, "Hey, your road manager told me you're good friends with Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols." I said, "Absolutely." He said, "They played here, and we have a piece of drywall that we cut out of the green room that Sid Vicious punched a hole in." So, you know, I took a photo. Hey, did my little. I put both of those on Facebook and MySpace, and my phone would not stop sliding across the tour bus table with all the likes. And I don't know if you remember, if you have memories and you go look in your old memories, like you might put $300 bills and you'll get 5 likes on that. Like we were so stingy back in the day with likes because we weren't sure how that, you know, what the true price of that was, right? Now we're just so happy to, like, we're programmed just to go, la, 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 la. And people were losing their minds. They're like, dude, where on the Warner Brothers lot is that house? I worked on the lot for 20 years. I didn't know we still had that. I'm like, it's not on the lot. It's in Tulsa. People didn't know where Tulsa was. And I was like,
Tulsa?
Exactly. And so I was onto something. And so I was like, I'm going to use this tour bus for the first time. I hadn't been on a tour in 12 years at that point, which is a lifetime for me. And so I was like the only dude sober on that tour bus, new camera, highly caffeinated. I'm like, I'm using this bus to go see all of the historical landmarks all across the U.S. And that's what I did. And so I went to Mary Tyler Moore's house where they filmed the opening for that TV show. When I got to Atlanta, I hit some spots, I'm trying to think, and I hit the grassy knoll, and I think we went to Mickey Mantle's gravesite. And I just started using the bus and using...
Because everyone was drunk and you were the only one.
Well, they were stoned, but and then, you know, let's not forget, this is the first time in human history that, there was Wi-Fi on the bus. I had a laptop with me. So now I had like the world's largest library known to man, Google. I had a way to broadcast it, Twitter, Facebook, you know, there was no Instagram in 2009. And so I just started to do that. So it becomes a hobby, this Delta Bravo, or this thing that I do. Where I
that started a new business.
Right. Well, it started a new, so 100% it did. And it eventually brings me back 5 years later. So from the first time I found that house, I fell in love. It was for sale for $42,000, which I was like, not to big league anybody, but you're not going to find anything in Los Angeles with the word real attached to it for $42,000. Not today, not in 2009, not in 1979. Right. So I could not believe that, one, the house was still on earth. Two, that it was for sale for $42,000. And three, that nobody had bought it and identified it as like what it is. It's true. It's a historic landmark. And I used to say like a national treasure. It's an international treasure. Mm-hmm. I go all over the world when I tour, and people are like, they know more about that than they ever cared about the music stuff. They're like, oh my God, I seen on the, like this book was written here. And if you listen to this, I don't know, some people are like, this whole thing starts from a 15-and-a-half-year-old student at Will Rogers High School here. She was failing English and got a D+ in creative writing. Mm-hmm. She writes The Outsiders.
At 17.
No, 15 and a half.
15 and a half,
She got it published at 17.
Oh, published,
And then when she gets to the publisher, they both agree that no boy will ever buy this book written by a girl. So she's no longer Susan L. Louise. They're going to call her Essie Hinton. The book goes on to be, you know, it starts the young adult literature category. So prior to that, nobody had ever written a book as a young adult for young adults about being a young adult. That's pretty effing amazing. Yeah. I mean, I'm a audiophile, I know just about everything about all the things I care about. I can still not tell you what the first rap record was. It's disputable, but tell me the first rock record. Who did the first rock? Who's the first ever? We can't even agree that we know. I can tell you who the first person to write a young adult literature. It starts here in Tulsa, Oklahoma by Essie Hinton. It's not even disputable. Mm-hmm. And that category is the number one category in books.
It's mandatory reading in Texas.
It's mandatory reading just about everywhere.
Is it?
And everywhere. I thought it maybe was a local phenomenon. When I was in 7th grade, I didn't read anything. So even if they told me I had to read something, I wasn't listening. But let me tell you what, if you ever tried to collect every edition from all over the planet, it's just not doable. I have hundreds of books. And every time I think I've got them all, I know that I don't. And then I find 5 more. I'm like, are you kidding me? And then I try to get, So it's incredible. It all starts here. She follows it up in college. She has a 5-year writer's block. She follows it up with Rumblefish. She wrote Tex as well in 75 after that. All 3 of them became movies, 1 from Disney, 2 from Francis Ford Coppola. Those movies changed my life. The Coppola ones, they launched the Brat Pack, which is, Tom Cruise, Patrick Swayze, Matt Dillon, C. Thomas Howell, Ralph Macchio, whose birthday was yesterday. Happy belated. Diane Lane. I mean, so there's all of this stuff that goes into it. So never in a million years did I think I'd go back and forth and fall in love with Tulsa, but I immediately did. I felt at home here. I'd been around the planet 20 times and always was very interested in where I was and always wondered what people did for a living here, what life must be like. But I was always keen to go back to LA and, reset. When I got here, I was like, I feel at home, and I couldn't explain that. And the more I came here, the more I fell in love with it. And if I'm looking back and guessing right now, I think I saw the opportunity that was here, and I saw the greatness that once was, which was the oil capital of the world. So that they had all of the needed things were here for me. You got Route 66, you had Circle Cinema, you had this beautiful Art Deco masterpiece of a city downtown. It was affordable. And then The Outsiders written and filmed here. And I was like, what's not to like? The sunsets, the people. You guys are what make it so great. But it was all of these things that started to light up. And then it was, again, what I did to get in the hip hop business or, deal myself in was see something that was missing. And then how could I deliver that via House of Pain? And when I got here, I felt like what was missing was that nobody was amortizing and celebrating the legacy that was S.E. Hinton. So it was like, so after 5 years of going back and forth, whether it was on tours or road trips or whatever, I'd always make a beeline to Tulsa and look at that house. Every year it was getting worse for wear. And every year the Habitat for Humanities was coming through, tearing through the neighborhood, putting up Habitat homes, which I always qualify as I'm a fan of what they do. I really am.
Sure.
I'm just not a fan if there's not somebody combing through before and to identify. I know the chances are low, but somebody's got to do due diligence and be like, and
well,
so
that kind of led to Delta Bravo, right?
Well, yeah, the first time I found the house, of course, it turned into a hobby. So I'm the kind of dude who finds a doorknob and goes, this is bitchin', let me build a house around it. Not the other way around. I don't find the house and they go, we need doorknobs.
So tell us about what that business
well,
is.
It's not even a business, it's a hobby. So I found the Outsiders house, I put it on the internet. People lost their minds. They were like, oh my God. People either from Tulsa go, oh, I know that house. I grew up here, blah, blah. But most people are like, I can't believe it's on Earth. Where is it? So I started to realize, I see a trend that anytime I post these historical things, people are losing it. And they're like, oh my God, where is it? So with the internet and the way to get around and post and publish, I started doing what we do. And so what we do is this, it's urban exploring. And the literal definition of that is usually people who live in Detroit, where they're like, there was the auto industry and there's the Packard factories and all, and they break in, if you will, and they take photos of abandoned like greatness. Well, in LA, we don't have that. We just don't. The value of property is too expensive for there to ever be anything
tear down,
abandoned.
build it back.
But what we were rich in is pop culture history, and that's my lane anyway, if you will. That's my what I love. So I started doing before and afters. I would take find a historical photo of like Batman coming out of the Batcave. Where's the Batcave? Is that on the back lot of RKO Studios or is that real? No, that's real. It's the Bronson Caves. How do we get to it? You got to go up to, up this back road in Bronson Canyon, park your car, hike up the hill. There's this hole that used to be a mining, and it's the Batcave. And then I would take the Batman photo, and then I'd take the new photo, put it up, give up, the location, and then it started to catch on, and I started to meet other photographers, other location hunters, other movie fanatics, other bands that were like, dude. And so it just became this hobby, and I got members all over the planet, and it's something to do that we just enjoy doing. It started from the Outsiders house. That was the thing that kicked it off. So as I started to do that, I started getting calls from everybody from Mark Burnett, who does like Shark Tank and Survivor. They're like, this is brilliant. And every show, and every other production company in Hollywood started going bananas. And I thought I had another tiger by the tail again. I'm like, okay, I got a good one. This is going to be
Ferraris are coming back.
Ferraris, come on, big money, no whammies. Believe me, when you ain't lying, you ain't lying. And I started taking meeting after meeting. And Hollywood has this really. Hollywood loves to tell you we love everything about what you're doing. Just change everything about it and make it a TV show for me. I'm like, you do that shit. Like, that is not what I do. So they were like, can't you get your real estate license and go out and find homes to buy? I'm like, no, dude, I'm not. That's not what I do. And they wanted to know, what do I take from these locations that would be of interest to people? And I'm like, I honor these locations, dude. Like, especially as a sober person, like what I've realized is like, your treasure is what's in here. Right? Like the IRS can't take it. I can't smoke it. I can't lose it. I can't and so those experiences were everything to me. And I'm like, this is more built for like Vice TV, where like I can still speak the way I speak. I do it with the LAPD guy. So it was like cop, robber, rapper guy, bad guy, cop guy, both native New Yorkers who are like refining our love for Los Angeles. We go around in my cop car, you know what I mean? And we look for stuff and we have different skill sets. And it was a brilliant, and everybody was like, we love it, but we're missing. And so I took meeting, then lower company, lower. And finally I was just like, they wanted the pleb counter, which is like, go to a yard sale, find a clown painting, hit it with turpentine. Oh my God, there's a Monet, $1 million. Guys, look, you could do it too. That's what they want. TV is very mechanical that way. And I'm like, dude, we don't take anything from the locations. There's no find it into. So it didn't turn out to be a TV show, but I never lost the love for it. And then it brought me back to the Outsider's house. So year 5, I noticed the house isn't looking as worse than I'd ever seen it looking. And I noticed that the Habitat for Humanity is 1 block away. And I'm like, dude, you're going to come here next summer and it's going to be gone. And that just kept playing in my head. It's going to be gone, dude. You better figure it out. I'm like, what? This is me talking to me. I'm like, I don't got time for you figure it out. Like, why doesn't someone else figure it out? Like, you figure that out. And finally I was like, no, dude, you figure that out.
Today's episode is brought to you by the historic Harwelden Mansion, your choice for a luxury bed and breakfast experience, and the Church Studio, home to your favorite rock and roll t-shirt.
The Church Studio was the Abbey Road of America in the 1970s, when Rock and Roll Hall of Famer and Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter and musician Leon Russell purchased a 100-year-old church and turned it into a recording studio and home office to Shelter Records. Now under significant renovation to bring it back to a recording studio, entertainment network, and community space. Get your church merch fixed today at thechurchstudio.com. Cool gear includes super soft t-shirts, hoodies, hats, journals, stickers, candles, and so much more. Thechurchstudio.com.
So I started to figure it out. And I just was like, I met the kid who was living there. There was like 2 families living there. I told them I was interested in they didn't even know what it was. I really didn't care. Nobody cared. And so I was like, ended up finding the true owner, who was absentee living in Florida. Had a friend call because I just didn't want to call and mess it up. My friend makes, again, like if I had a fraction of his money, I'd burn all of our money, except for Teresa's money. I wouldn't burn. Teresa might give my buddy a run for the money. But the truth is he called. He said, I know that the house is not listed, but we'd be interested in hearing if you were ever interested in selling it. We know it was for sale 5 years ago for 40 something.
Yeah.
And she said, your timing is excellent. I am thinking of selling. I won't take a penny less than 20 grand.
Oh,
and he said,
highway robbery.
And he said, ma'am, I've seen it. It is complete garbage. Now, keep in mind, my buddy was like, why are you having me do this? He couldn't even comprehend that there is a house on earth for 42 grand, much less for the 20 that he thought it was like he didn't understand it. I'm like, you've seen The Outsiders, right? He's like, no, dude. He could care less. He was just like, I love you, so I'm going to do this for you, but I got to go. So he makes the call. That's the best guy you want. He could have destroyed it for me too, but he didn't care which way she was going to go. So he said, ma'am, I've seen it. It is a complete shambles. I won't pay you a penny more than 15 grand. And she said, accepted. But the caveat is you have to wait 30 days. And he said, why would I wait 30 days? Because the tenants are 8 months behind in rent and they owe me $4,000. And last year they didn't pay rent the whole year. They cleared it out with their tax check. And I know that they're going to stiff me, but I want to. So it was just principle for her. She didn't even, the cash was like, so the 30 days for me was a terror. Every day I'm thinking, she's going to Google me. She's going to figure out she's going to think I'm rich and I'm not. And so 30 days comes and goes. She goes, yeah, they didn't pay. We were like shocked. And then she sells it to me for 15 grand. And then I paid 5 grand to move out the people who had no means to do that. And then I drove from LA. I bought this house sight unseen. I had never been inside the house before. And then when I got inside the house, I realized that I had been robbed. That house, she knew better than me. She did good. Never buy a house sight unseen is but this time it worked out great. And that's when I panicked. And that's when I said, okay, this can no longer be your fort. The coolest movie memorabilia known to man. You have to do this you need help. And if you're going to ask for help, it has to be something communal that's not yours anymore. Because my original plan I was like, are you kidding me? This house can be had for 42 grand. And then I'm looking at LA, what I'm paying for rent. And I'm like in Beverly Hills. And I'm like, I could have my own like home in Tulsa. Like what? And it happens to be the Outsider's house. So that was the original plan. And then
you were going to move in.
Yeah. Part-time, for 42 grand. Yeah, for sure. I could, even at 42,
I live in the Outsider's house.
Same, and and I don't live there. By the way, people always ask, "Do I do?" You wouldn't get any sleep because there's always people coming by. But I originally thought, that was going to be, and if somebody figured it out, that if they were nice, I would say, "Hey, would you like to come and see my One Outsider's poster?" in Pony's room, and because I didn't have any collection, I had any of that. So I buy the house, panic, and ask for help. And I didn't think anybody cared about this house because I was like, how could it just be sitting there like that for so long? I was wrong. Everybody did care about the house.
They just needed a leader.
And I think you guys were too close to see it. And I would have, if I lived in the blocks, I was like, yo, we should probably get out of here. Let's like, you just can't see it when you're that close to it. That
We saw the movie being filmed downtown.
No, I know. And that's what I'm saying. So it's like, it doesn't seem, so I saw it with different eyes.
And by we, I mean I. None of these people in this room did.
But I saw it with different eyes, and I understood it had value. And I understood that like people would travel to see this thing and couldn't understand why nobody had saw that prior to me. Because again, like, I'm a forward thinking, and that's what I'm good at. Like, but I'm not that good that it was like, that wasn't like a deep cut. There are other things here. I won't say them because, I will say them. There's no reason not to say them, but there's a house, and I think the roof caved in, a tree fell in it from Pretty Boy Floyd. He lived here. So there's a Pretty Boy Floyd house. And there's a house that most of the book Tulsa by Larry Clark was shot in. That looks like it's going to be similar to the Outsider's house soon if someone doesn't buy it. Now, I don't know if those can be museums, but why couldn't they? You have the trifecta here, like in LA. So for instance, I'm a Fast Times at Ridgemont High fanatic. I know most of the cast. I grew up at that movie. It was filmed at my mall. When I first made my first money, I bought a house right next to the Sherman Oaks Galleria just to be like, I've made it. I'm here. That house just came up on the market. It's $760,000, and I don't care if you gave it to me for free. The neighbors you're not making a museum in that neighborhood. It's just not going to happen. And I understand. I wouldn't let you make one either if I'm your neighbor. I'm like, you're not making a museum. The reason the Outsiders works is the reason the Christmas Story House works, and the reason the Field of Dreams worked. They were all in neighborhoods. The Field of Dreams is just out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So
are you involved in that too?
No, but I know that there are things, and I've had conversations with the owner of the Christmas Story House.
Yeah.
He's in a bad neighborhood where anything would have been a step up.
Right.
He's turned that into millions of dollars of years. I mean, Christmas Story, it's hard to beat that. You kids, even if you're Muslim, Jewish, it doesn't matter what faith you are, kids are indoctrinated with Santa. So you can ask a kid any time of the year, you want to go see Santa? So yes, yes is always the answer. And there are a lot of Easter eggs in that movie, meaning there's a lot of stuff to sell as far as bunny costumes and BB guns and leg lamps. And so, but those are a step up for that neighborhood. The Outsider's house, if you go to that neighborhood now, you're like, it doesn't look that bad. You should have seen it 5 years ago. Yeah. Trust me. And but I mean, people are like, they just redid all the roads, all the sidewalks, everybody's grass is green and cut. It's miraculous. And it was a ripple effect of what we did at the house. But, people thank me, and this is just I know we'd probably be running out of time, but I always get stopped around Tulsa and they thank me for what I've done here. But what Tulsa has done for me is who the real thanks goes to. I didn't do this thing. I was silly enough to buy it as a fan. How could I not at 15? And 15 was a lot of money for me. I had 28 grand in my name. I know what I have, and I knew, and it cost me 20 just to get the keys to the place. And at the time, my wife was like, she never seen the movie or read the book. She was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, so, and she wasn't against it. She was just like, okay, like I was playing with all my money. All my chips were in, and I didn't even know what this was going to turn out to be. I didn't know if it was going to be a fort for sure. And what I thought I was building, at first I thought I was buying my first home since the 90s. Then it was like, okay, if I ask for help, I'm going to make a movie museum. And then I was like, I don't have any movie collectibles. What am I going to do?
A lot of people here do.
Well, I collected, that's my strong suit, collecting. So we have the world's largest collection of movie and literature memorabilia from the Outsiders known to man. And I hang my hat on that. I brought it back to Tulsa. Yeah. I went and collected it. Number 3 is that it's really not a movie museum because the people who come by are usually fans of the book, and the whole family tree is there. The grandfather who worked on the film, or remember when it was, they helped at some point or were in that neighborhood. Their daughters who saw the movie on its original release and read it in 7th grade, or they go from 8 to 80, and the whole family is like wide-eyed, and it's a rite of passage for most people. And that is something that I wasn't prepared for, because that has a different obligation. Movie is like you just stand back and let them. The literature part is an educational thing, and it gives a whole new a thing to it, if you know what I mean. Like, kids are inspired now because you can throw a rock down anywhere in LA and hit 5 famous people, and New York the same. But here, they're not as easy to, the people that look around and be inspired by, and Susie is one of them, and for sure. So is Leon. So is there's people here that you're like, we need to elevate that to be like, look, it is possible, because this is flyover country for people from both coasts. They're like, whatever, you leave here to go to LA to make it, but that doesn't have to be the case. And we live in a world now more than ever. You don't have to be anywhere to do any of that shit. You don't have to be in Nashville or LA. It could help if you're in country and you're a singer-songwriter and you want to get, but you don't have to be there anymore. You don't have to work from the office anymore. Everything is kind of remote, and you can kind of...
Well, that brings me to my next question. And you are so good at branding and so good at promoting. It's okay. At promoting everything that you're involved with. I mean, do you do that? Do you do all the posts yourself?
Yes, I do everything myself, and all you have to do is watch Mary Beth Babcock to feel less than, because she is the greatest.
She's
of
good
it.
too, isn't she? Yeah.
And it's good because it'll always elevate me, and Teresa does well at it too. There's people who know what they're doing. I've always
We're
done
talking
that.
about Teresa Knox,
yes, of
owner
course.
of Harwelden
There you
Church
go.
Studio,
Sorry,
blah,
yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah. Yeah. We've dropped her name a couple of times.
There you go.
She just
Yeah.
crossed her eyes at us.
That's it, of course. In hip hop, that's what I did. I'm a branding and marketing guy, and it gets tiring doing tooting your own thing, or trying to get people to. So this was utilizing a skill I already had, and then I work harder because it's not from. I get benefits from it clearly, but I work harder and more conscientiously because I have to be careful. Like I'm not in The Outsiders. I didn't write The Outsiders. I didn't produce. I have nothing to do with The Outsiders except for being a fan and buying the thing. So there's also weird, like I don't want to step on toes. I don't want to. So it's a fine balance and a fine dance between honoring the legacy or overdoing it or exploiting it as well. I don't ever want to do that.
Do you like doing the social media stuff? Because
sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah.
I think, when we were talking about like outside stuff and riches and all that, I know that I will be rich and I don't mean financially, but that's part of it, when I can pay someone else to do that, because the internet for me, I'm over it. Like it's too much.
I'm with you.
When you see me off of it, I've made it. Yeah. And you're like, they still do great, but he just doesn't do it anymore. I'll be road tripping and exploring. I like to just do that. It's a necessary evil. It gives and it takes, and you have to be. You can't be. If you're not on the internet, it's like if the tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it thing. If you don't have a imprint, we're all brands now. And I was a brand since I'm a kid because I didn't like who I was. So I had to invent a character to represent for Danny O'Connor. Can't speak for himself. So Danny Boy does the talking. And then that's a whole
you
other,
created that third person.
Yeah, that's like yo, dog, like I ain't trying to, it's like the rah-rah shit. Because Danny's scared and like, even though I'm tall and big, I'm like, I don't like confrontation. I don't like to, so I overdo it, So I've been branding and for a long time. I'm glad I want to say, I got to be careful what I say. I don't have kids, but I'm glad I don't have to explain to them that and I'm glad when I was a kid that I would have been in prison forever, just the stuff that come out of my mouth. It's terrible. Because I grew up that way. I grew up in a household where there was no, we just started at the lowest and cut the deepest, and then we work our way up. And I used to talk crazy. I'm still liable to do it. And then, can you imagine if I could go, let's roll the tape back 10 years. You said, I was like, oh my God. I say shit now that I'm like, I'm glad there wasn't being recorded. I might have said something today that I don't, but if I had a kid, I would be like, so I'm glad I didn't grow up in that era. All this, there wasn't a camera on every corner when I was a kid. Because I wouldn't be here.
I'd love to for a moment before we run out of time here, just take it back to the music and I'm really interested in that early 90s time period because there was so much rapid change in music and pop culture. Yeah. Of course you had Nirvana and grunge kind of signified this whole new era. But the bigger change to me was hip hop becoming a mainstream monolith in defining pop culture. It's been that way for 20 years now. Rock doesn't define pop culture anymore. And you know this better than anyone. So I want to get your perspective on what it was like being in that scene.
It was fantastic. It was I miss punk rock. I'm 51, so although, obviously it was punk rock, but I missed that ride. Yeah. And hip hop was the next next best thing, especially being a white guy living in suburbia. There's nothing more punk rock than bringing home Public Enemy records and playing them at 10, and scaring everybody in the neighborhood. And so it was revolutionary. It was dangerous. It was, from a whole other, energy that was just not in suburbia. And it also came with the price. I mean, people call you nasty names behind your back. Being a good guy, being good at fighting and being a tough guy. I didn't hear it first person, but I heard people would say it across the mall, or say spit shit out of, drive-by cars, call you, slurs and stuff like that. But I grew up in the time where there was a big divide between what you could, do with if you were in that rock format thing, you paid a price for it, but it was a badge of honor. You wore it like I did. And then what I loved about hip hop that I didn't find in rock music was what I use today. That's what brought me to the Outsider's House. It all goes back to the scavenger hunting of it. So if you were in prior to hip hop, punk rock would have been the thing I would have been interested in, right? And I was in punk rock, but not in the Sex Pistols era of that. But back then, you just did not go on Amazon and hook up the whole look. I mean, you had to run the city to find it. And that was the greatest thing ever, because I'm like, how did you get your hair blue? Oh, it's Manic Panic. What? Yeah, you have to go to Nana's in Santa Monica, and they're only open on Santa Monica. How are we going to get from the Valley to Santa Monica? And then how much is it? And what? I'm scared to go in there. And it was that, oh, how'd you bleach it blonde and do this? Where'd you get those bondage pants? You have to go to a waterbed store in Reseda that also sells sex toys and bondage, and that's how you literally had to skate. And then you'd piece this whole shit together, and hip hop is the same way. Where do you get those purple Pumas and those Kangol hats and that Fila jacket and all of the accoutrements that would be, and then you get your shit, and then you kind of you got to test it out on Friday night. You're getting stomped out, or you're getting laid, something's gonna, or you're getting laughed off and slowly you start to see other dudes. You're I could tell the way you dress. You're a music dude, and I could tell by the way certain people. And so there was a handful of guys in my neighborhood, especially white guys that were in hip hop. Everlast was one of them. Another kid, Brett Mazer, who I still talk to. I just talked to him a couple of days ago, who you may know from a group called Crazy Town. He also was producing Belle Biv DeVoe in high school. He's producing Belle Biv DeVoe tracks. And a ton of other things like that. And you start to find your tribe. And you were like, yo, these are the dudes that are doing hip hop. And I went to school. My school, Ice Cube went to the school. Another kid, Divine Styler, went to the school. Everlast went to school. So we had this weird, because of busing and because of where the school was situated. So it was in Woodland Hills, which is a nice, when you get Hollywood money, you move to Woodland Hills and get you a nice 5-bedroom, 6-bedroom house I was middle class, but a stone's throw from a very nice, rich neighborhood. And so there was a very eclectic bunch of people who got bussed in and who went to that school. Poor kids went, and I lived in condos at the time. There was 3 units and then a walkway. And past that walkway, they all went to Cleveland High School. And that school sucked. That was like a blessing that I got to go to Taft. And in Taft, that was, and at that school was a lot of different, people were cool with it. The mindset was do your thing. And so I did my thing, and then hip hop was my thing. And then when I started to go out at night, I guess what I'm trying to tell you, there was a weird little small band of people who ran around, or clique of people who did what they did in that scene. And then it was Lollapalooza that changed all that for me. So when I went to the first Lollapalooza, I went as a fan, and I was sitting at the back, and I saw Living Colour and Susie and the Banshees and all the stuff that I loved anyway. And I started to see the fans just go they just got in sync with this is all cool now. If Ice-T is telling you that Perry Farrell is cool and that James is cool, prior to that, those were warring tribes, if you will. It just wouldn't, and I started to see this shift in music where other people were collaborating, and, Perry and Ice-T did a collaboration together, and Susie and the Banshees was using Funky Drummer as a Kiss Them For Me, as sampled with a hip hop. And it was just, this evolution of music and just acceptance of all forms of it. I keep in mind, in 89 and 90, I worked at a record store. If we got a reggae record, it didn't have its own section. There was no reggae section. There was a world music section.
Oh, yeah.
So if you were Steel Pulse, I'd put you next to Yanni, the master of the fucking pan flute. And shit that I was
Yanni.
like, I'm saying it was just, we would, if you were an R&B act, you might get, so Fishbone or 24/7 Spies or Bad Brains, we didn't even know, they didn't even know where to put it. Rap didn't have its own section, so it would go in the R&B section. So you'd be next to the Gap Band if you were, and there wasn't enough so things started to change. And then these, and people started to get like more open to the idea of like, this can all work and this can all be, and, I was talking to a friend today about what that change was like. I don't know even how, it was just like monumental as far as that, because you didn't have to draw alliances now. And now we see the opposite, where people get mad at the Kardashians wearing Metallica shirts. And, you see the memes, stop wearing band shirts that you don't know the songs that they sing. Because back then you were identified by the shirt you wore.
You went to the concert and got
you
the
knew
shirt.
it. And if you didn't, it was a problem. You couldn't. So again, I went the first year, and the second year we played. So us and Cypress were the main, besides Pornos for Pyros, which was Perry's thing, at Lollapalooza. So talk about like, fanboy at the back of the thing, doing mushrooms, to the main, the stage doing the, they're legal, by the way, whoever laughed, in Colorado now. And again, although I'm sober, if there was a free lapse, I would definitely be doing shrooms. There was like a weekend off. You guys.
Danny, we're getting
mushrooms.
a wrap.
Yes,
so
of course.
what are you doing musically now?
Nothing. Thank God. I don't need.
You're not
I listen
writing?
to
You're
it.
not doing
No,
anything?
I don't need. You know what? Music is one of those things. It's always been a constant in my life. I feel that being in that business ruined a lot of the way I felt about it.
Yeah.
Just because you've seen up the, behind the wizard's curtain.
Yeah.
And similar to The Outsiders, where I could apply my skill to somebody else's legacy, and it makes it more palatable and comfortable for me to do. Music, I went back to being a fan, and it's freeing. Because I don't care anymore. I just listen to the music I like, some new, most of it old. And
what do you think musicians are going through right now with COVID and not being able to tour?
Hopefully they're making great music. I mean, I don't know that great music comes out of like winning streaks either. They say that in the music industry, you got a lifetime to make your first album and a year to make your second.
Yeah.
And so you got a lifetime's worth of shit in that first one. And the second one, if you're lucky, you got a year to figure it out and read, and it's tough. So with struggle and pain and all, that's where the great art comes out of. So hopefully they've got no excuses not to be.
All right, I got a year to hit rock bottom and come back.
That's it, right?
Make my second record.
Hey,
Okay.
But
all right.
That's if they ain't making good stuff now, when will they?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, what a treat it has been for you to come on and talk with us about your life and your experiences. It's been great.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys.
Danny Connor, Danny
That's
Boy.
That's it.
2 different people, right?
3.
Disco Dan, right?
Disco Dan, yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's right.
He's making a
Left him
comeback at
out.
Sand Springs at Skates.
Oh, that's right. You did the roller skating
I'm
thing.
staying roller skating until
You're
I
bringing
learn
it
how
back single-handedly.
until I learn how to jam skate, or they call it shuffling. And if I ain't shuffling, I ain't really skating. So I'll be there tonight, 8 o'clock.
Over at Sand Springs.
Loving
They
it.
want to hang with Danny Boy. Go to
on
Sand
out.
Springs, the
That's
roller
it.
rink.
I got to figure out one thing real quick.
John Moss.
We talked about groups. We forgot you're half of the Burger Brothers.
I just had a burger with the brother yesterday.
So are you a foodie?
Yeah. It wouldn't. Yes, I love bad, greasy food. So that is my foodie. That's not the usual definition of it, but yes, I came to Tulsa and I realized that you guys have an amazing. It is literally the burger capital of the world now, and it's not artificially. It didn't have to. It's here, and you have 32 mom and pop burger places just in the city limits alone, and I've eaten at all of them, and they're all.
That's so funny.
As unique as the next. They all get Tulsa beef, which is the people who purvey and every time I've asked them, and I ask them every time, tell me your secret. And they don't miss a beat. They say, our burgers are made with love. And I believe every one of them, because it's all the same ingredients, yet it's a different love from wherever. And Tulsa has the best burgers in the world. And someday I'm going to ask for your help and Teresa's help. And we're going to do a burger festival. We'll have burgers, beers, and bands. And I will enjoy 2 of those.
Do it.
And we will
Always
crown,
promoting.
somebody's got to get crowned the best burger in Tulsa, because it truly is the burger capital of the world. And
That's
so
cool. Yeah.
Well, we're so
Yes.
glad you were here today.
Listen,
Appreciate it. It's an interesting story, a great story, and it's
appreciate
not over yet. We know you've got good
That's it.
things coming.
I'll come back for part 2.
All right. We'll expect you to. Thank you, Danny, so much. Danny
pleasure.
O'Connor, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, make sure to like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, on Facebook.
Yep, where the church studio is the star of From the Chamber. Thanks
Yeah.
for being here.